President Trump is slamming some of America's allies today during a high-stakes NATO summit in Brussels. That's where he told NATO's Secretary General the U.S. allies need to spend more on defense.
He also said Germany was captive to Russia because of a plan to build a natural gas pipeline between the two countries. Weijia Jiang is traveling with the president and is following the latest.
We have a very good relationship.
Moments after posing for a pleasant photo op, President Trump lectured NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, accusing other NATO members of not paying their fair share of defense spending.
Many countries owe us a tremendous amount of money for many years back, where they're delinquent, as far as I'm concerned, because the United States has had to pay for them.
The United States does pay a higher percentage of its GDP toward defense than any other NATO member, about twice as much as France and roughly 3 times more than Germany. In 2014, NATO countries set a goal to contribute 2% by 2024, but the president interpreted that as a formal commitment.
I think it's a very bad thing for NATO.
President Trump also singled out Germany for supporting gas deals with Moscow, since one of NATO's main objectives is to stop Russian aggression.
How can you be together when a country is getting its energy from the person you want protection against or from the group that you want protection?
Because we understand that when we stand together also when dealing with Russia, we are stronger. I think what we have seen is that...
No, you're just making Russia richer. Well, you're not dealing with Russia, you're making Russia richer.
Secretary Stoltenberg acknowledged some NATO members agree with the president's point, but said it shouldn't divide the alliance.
We have always been able to unite around our core task to protect and defend each other, because we understand that we are stronger together than apart.
Weijia Jiang is traveling with the president in Brussels, and she joins us now with the latest. So, Weijia, the president went after Germany for almost 5 minutes today. I think most people expected that they were sort of entering an environment where it'd be a photo op, there'd be some handshakes, and then suddenly he started going on and on about Germany and trade with Russia. How are other leaders responding to this?
Well, you just heard from the Secretary General, and basically he is, I think, trying to appease the president by acknowledging that this is an issue and other countries agree with his point. But he is trying to shift the focus back to why they are here at NATO in the first place, stressing that it is important that they have a united front and not worry about these issues that have to do with individual countries, even though the president, he says, is right to point these out. And we did also hear from the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and she said that Germany makes independent policies and decisions. That was in response to what the president has been talking about this morning, and she added that she is expecting to have controversial discussions here at the summit. And we already know she expected that even without this latest line of attack from President Trump about the pipeline with Russia and about supporting the gas deals. Even before that, it was going to be tense. You'll remember that infamous picture, right, Anne-Marie, between the president and Angela Merkel during the G7 summit. That's the last time they saw each other face to face. And so not only with Germany, but with several of our closest allies, this tension has been mounting. And so it was always expected this was going to be a tough summit. And now the president certainly has set the tone with those remarks this morning.
Well, you mentioned the closest allies. Not only is he going to be meeting with Angela Merkel, but later on he's also going to be meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The last time they met, when Canada was hosting the last summit, things definitely did not go over well at all. You know, what is sort of anticipated to be on the agenda with Prime Minister Trudeau?
We are still waiting for official confirmation about that face-to-face, but we know he is meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron. And even though it's not official yet, certainly we expect he will be talking with Prime Minister Trudeau, because you're right, the last time they talked face-to-face, things were actually looking great because it was at the G7 summit. It appeared that President Trump was going to sign the joint communique before leaving, but then you'll remember after the president departed early, the Prime Minister made remarks about the president's comments on trade and how hard he was going against the EU, Canada, and Mexico. And the Prime Minister promised to retaliate. And after that, the president started tweeting and unveiled the fact that he was pulling out of that joint agreement after all. And so it was very tense. That will certainly be on their agenda. And with President Macron as well. You know, trade is an ongoing issue. And even though these allies have urged the president to reconsider, he has not. And so now we are, you know, set for a looming trade war. And I think that will dominate the discussions. But really, the focus here is NATO and trying to present this united front, trying to focus on exactly, you know, the strength of these member nations instead of President Trump's rhetoric about how everyone else is not spending enough money.
You know, you raise a good point, Weijia, about the rhetoric that the president is using. In one of the tweets, the president says that NATO has been delinquent. That's his word for many years. It's not a question. Look, the president is raising an important point. The allies have pledged 2% of their GDP towards NATO. They need to meet that commitment. Everybody agrees with that, even Secretary Stoltenberg. But the language that the president is using seems to be aimed at shoring up his base here in the United States. There's no such, it's not a delinquency. It's a pledge by the allies to, it's a current commitment of 2% that they have pledged to make as part of their GDP. In return, the United States has bases all across Europe. So the question has to be, does the president understand what the NATO alliance is supposed to do and what it's meant to do as a bulwark, for example, towards Russia, which he is certainly going to be, I guess, raising that point with Russian President Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, Vlad, I think you really hit the nail right at the center of what this controversy is about, because it's about interpretation. And the president seems to be interpreting the pledge that these NATO countries made in 2014 very differently from what it actually is. As you said correctly, it was a pledge. It was a recognition of a goal that by the year 2024, the countries would be contributing 2% of their GDP. But the president is taking that as a formal agreement of payment.
Right.
And because many of these countries have yet to actually get to that number, he's saying, you know, retroactively, they need to be keeping tabs. They need to be having, you know, a bill of all their missed payments. But that is just not a correct understanding of the agreement that was reached 4 years ago. And that's the problem here, that these nations say, look, we're doing our best. We're doing what we can. We understand it's not enough, but we've actually started spending more money. And that's why one puzzling piece of this is that the president could claim victory. You know, since the campaign trail, he has said these countries need to spend more money. He has used harsh language. He has been tough, and it has worked because many of these countries are spending more than they were before President Trump came into office. But that's not enough for him. He wants everyone to reach that 2%, and he said this morning he doesn't want it to happen over time. It should happen immediately. But as you pointed out, Vlad, that wasn't some formal agreement. It was an understanding that everyone would work toward that goal.
Right. And the president says, what are we getting out of it? I'll remind our viewers that the Article 5 pledge, which is an attack on one is an attack on all, has only been invoked once, and it was when the United States was attacked on 9/11. And those NATO allies have shed not just treasure, but they've also shed blood in support of the United States' global war on terror.
Absolutely, and that's so important too, because the president seems to be painting this picture that the U.S. is funding, you know, defense for the rest of the world, and that again is not an understanding or a correct portrayal of what NATO is. You know, this is an extremely important alliance that the U.S. benefits from, as you just pointed out, and so that picture that he has painted is just not accurate.
All right, Weijia Jiang.
But it does play well.
Yeah, indeed.
With his base.
Weijia Jiang reporting, traveling with the president in Brussels. Thank you, Weijia. We appreciate it as always.
Anytime.